There's a version of loyalty that looks like love but is really just fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being the one who didn't show up. For most of my 20s I confused the two so completely that I couldn't have told you which was which, even if you'd asked. I found out my family had gone to Napa Valley without me on a Tuesday afternoon, through a photo my cousin Ramona posted to her Instagram story. She was holding a wine glass against a backdrop of golden hills, surrounded by my aunts, my parents, my sister Quinn, Quinn's boyfriend, and at least 15 people who shared my last name. The caption said, "Best weekend ever." And there I was, in my apartment in Portland, eating leftover soup and going through a backlog of work emails, completely unaware that the trip my mother had been vaguely mentioning for months had already happened. Already come and gone. Already been captioned and hashtagged, and posted with a filter that made the whole thing look like a painting. My name is Sera Thorne, and this is the story of how I spent years making myself small enough to keep the peace, and then built something so large, my family couldn't look past it anymore. Growing up outside of Cincinnati, our family had a particular way of presenting itself to the world. My mother, a woman who treated social performance like a second religion, believed above all else in the appearance of togetherness. Family photos were coordinated. Holiday dinners were catered. Every gathering had a centerpiece and a color scheme and a carefully managed guest list. And at the center of all of it, always, was my younger sister Quinn. Quinn was 3 years younger and about 40 degrees warmer than any room she entered. She had a memory for everyone's drink order, and a way of laughing that made you feel like the funniest person she'd ever been in a room with. People loved her effortlessly. The way you love something bright, something warm, something you can feel from across the room without having to think about it. I was the other one. I was the one who sat by the window at parties and took careful notes on things nobody would remember I noticed. Who could tell you the color of the wallpaper at my grandmother's house in 1997, but forgot to call on people's birthdays? Who spent whole afternoons drawing in notebooks and on napkins and on the backs of envelopes, always drawing, even when it wasn't convenient. My mother called it an artist's temperament, which was her polished way of saying, I was sometimes exhausting to accommodate and difficult to know how to showcase. I didn't resent Quinn for any of it. That's true, and I want to say it plainly, because the easy version of this story would make her the villain. She wasn't. She was bright, and I loved her, and she'd grown up in the same house I had, shaped by the same preferences, the same rankings, the same unspoken curriculum about who mattered most at any given moment. She didn't invent the system. She just fit it better than I did. What I resented, quietly and for a long time, was the particular kind of love my family seemed to have for me. The retrospective kind. The kind that arrived loudest after I'd already walked out of the room. I moved to Portland at 24 to work in graphic design. On the side. Always on the side, always in stolen hours, I painted murals, large-scale work on building walls, the backs of warehouses, the long flat sides of buildings in neighborhoods that didn't get a lot of beautiful things built for them deliberately. It wasn't the work I got paid for, it was the work that kept me honest. Over the years I'd quietly built up a body of it in my city, a scattered unofficial gallery, that you could only see if you knew which blocks to walk down and which alleys to cut through. Meanwhile, I kept showing up for my family the way I always had. I flew home for Thanksgiving. I helped my mother research assisted living facilities when my grandmother's health started slipping. I drove 8 hours, round trip, to attend Quinn's graduate school graduation, stood in the rain outside the auditorium because there hadn't been enough reserved seats. Nobody asked me to do any of it. I just did, because that was how I understood belonging to work. You showed up, you kept showing up, and eventually maybe, someone made room. When Quinn's 30th birthday came up, my mother mentioned a trip. Wine country, she said. A destination weekend. Maybe a villa somewhere in Napa. She brought it up on a phone call in March, the way she mentioned the kitchen she was thinking about repainting. In passing, with no urgency. Like something that would eventually resolve itself without anyone having to try very hard. I said it sounded wonderful. I asked if she wanted help researching accommodations. She said she'd handle it, she'd send details. She never did. I followed up twice, once by text in April, once in a May phone call that ended with my mother saying they were still sorting out logistics, not to worry. I cleared a long weekend in May just in case. I didn't book anything else over it. May came and went. Then it was June, and there was Ramona's Instagram story. 70% of my extended family, posed in a vineyard, Quinn laughing's in the center with the flower crown tilted slightly to one side. The kind of photo that looks effortless because someone worked very hard to make it look that way. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time. Then I set it face down on the counter and finished my soup. I waited 2 days before I called my mother. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to say it without sounding like I was accusing her of something, even though what I was actually doing was asking her to confirm that she had, in fact, done something. When she picked up, I kept it simple. Mom, I saw Ramona's photos. Was I not invited to Quinn's birthday trip? There was a pause. The kind that isn't really a pause, because the person on the other end already has their answer ready. They're just packaging it. Honey, she said, in a voice that was warm in the precise and deliberate way warmth is sometimes used as a buffer. It was really more of a small thing. Ramona's photo had 15 people in it. Another pause, shorter this time. Quinn was worried about some tension between you two, after Christmas. I didn't remember a tension at Christmas, I said so. You know how you are, Sera. My mother exhaled. Not quite a sigh. Something more controlled than a sigh. You make everything feel heavy sometimes. Quinn just wanted the weekend to feel light. We didn't want her to feel uncomfortable at her own celebration. Heavy. That word went somewhere specific inside my chest and stayed there. It unpacked itself slowly, over the next several days, like something that had been folded up tight for a long time and was finally given enough space to open. You make everything feel heavy, as if I were a weather event, as if I arrived at places and pulled the air out of the room simply by existing in it. Okay, I said, I understand. I didn't understand, but there was nothing left to say that wouldn't have confirmed exactly what she'd just told me. That I was the complicated one, the heavy one, the one whose presence required management. So I said okay, and I said goodbye, and I put the phone down on the counter. I didn't call anyone right away. I sat on the floor of my apartment with my back against the couch, looking at the paint stains on my oldest jeans, cobalt along the left knee, a streak of burnt sienna on the right thigh. And I waited to feel something other than what I was feeling. Nothing else arrived, just that one word unpacking itself, taking up the room. Eventually I texted my friend Meg, can I come over? Meg was the kind of person who understood that certain things needed to be witnessed before they could be processed. She sat across from me at her kitchen table with tea she'd made without asking if I wanted any, and she didn't say a word while I told her everything. The Instagram photo, the call, the word heavy. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then, what do you want to do? I don't know yet, I said. But I don't think I want to fight them about it. So what do you want instead? I looked at the tea and thought about the mural I'd been sketching for 3 months. A series of 4 portraits. 4 women from a specific block in my city's Hillsborough neighborhood. Women whose families had come from Guatemala, from Ethiopia, from the Philippines, from Vietnam. Women who'd built whole lives here, in a city that almost never put their faces on anything. I want to finish the project I've been putting off, I said. Meg looked at me carefully, then do that first. I drove home and opened the sketchbook. For the next 6 weeks I worked the way I had in graduate school, obsessively, at odd hours, with the kind of focus that makes the rest of life go slightly out of focus around it. I reached out to a local business owner named Mr. Dow, who ran a dry cleaning shop in Hillsborough and had been offering me his building's back wall for 2 years. The wall was 40 feet wide and faced a side street, where the foot traffic was mostly neighbors who had nowhere more convenient to be on a weekday afternoon. I told him I was ready. I started painting in late June. I worked in the early mornings before the heat set in, and sometimes in the evenings with portable lights. The 4 women I was painting had agreed to be photographed, to sit for interviews, to let me try to understand the specific architecture of their faces. We talked while I sketched and blocked in color, sometimes in 2 languages at once, sometimes mostly in silence. Mr. Dow brought me coffee every morning I showed up. He was 81 years old, had run the same shop since 1987, and had a laugh that sounded like a door swinging wide open. He told me stories about the neighborhood from 30 years ago while I painted, and I listened, and some of what he said found its way into the margins of my sketchbook. Meanwhile, my family's social media kept moving without me. My mother captioned a photo of herself and Quinn at brunch, my whole heart. My aunt reposted the vineyard photos with a row of red emojis. Quinn posted a reel from the weekend set to music I'd never heard. I watched from a distance that surprised me with its quietness. I thought I would feel angrier than I did. Instead, I felt something cleaner. The absence of wondering. For years I'd spent energy wondering whether I was imagining the edges of things, whether the conditional quality of my place in the family was real, or constructed in my own head. Now I knew. And there was a particular kind of relief in knowing, even when what you know hurts. A journalist named Suki, a friend of a friend who covered art and urban development, walked past the wall one afternoon on her way somewhere else and stopped. She sent me a direct message that night. Is this yours? Can I write about it? I thought about it for 3 days. Then I wrote back, yes, but let me show you more of what I'm trying to do first. What I had been thinking about, slowly and without pressure, was whether the mural could do something beyond being beautiful. I'd been volunteering for 2 years with a local literacy nonprofit that ran ESL programs for adult immigrants in the metro area. Funding tutors, conversation circles, materials for people who were trying to build lives in a language that still felt unsteady under their feet. They were perpetually underfunded in the particular quiet way that things become when they're essential but unglamorous. Suki and I met for coffee. I told her the concept. The mural would be publicly unveiled in August. A fundraising page would go live the same day. Every dollar donated in the first 10 days would go directly to the ESL program. She set down her cup. Sera, she said, I don't think you understand what kind of story this is. I told her I'd be happy with enough to fund 1 tutor for 1 year. Her piece ran in a regional arts magazine 3 weeks before the unveiling. 2 days later, a national design publication picked it up. The headline read, The Portland artist, who paints the people cities forget. The photo that ran with it was taken the morning I finished. Me standing beside the wall, 4 faces, each one 10 feet tall, all of them looking directly at the camera with an expression I can only describe as arrived. The piece went live on a Thursday. By Friday morning, the fundraising page had exceeded its goal. By Saturday afternoon, my phone was a sustained, uninterrupted vibration, the kind that stops feeling like individual notifications and becomes something more like a sound. Rhett, my partner, who had watched all of this unfold with a quiet attentiveness I am still grateful for, showed me his screen Saturday evening with an expression that was equal parts wonder and something like satisfaction. "You're trending," he said. "Actually trending, in several categories." "How many categories?" He showed me. I sat down on the couch and stared at the ceiling for a minute. The texts from my family arrived in a wave over the next few hours. My aunt first, then a cousin, then 2 more cousins, then my father, who almost never texted, with a message that said simply, "Very impressive, kiddo. You should have told us you were working on this." And then, Quinn. "Everyone here is talking about your mural. Mom just showed me the article. It's incredible, Sera. I don't even know what to say. Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at her message for a long time. Then I typed, "I didn't know you were interested." I put the phone in a kitchen drawer and went to bed. My mother called 4 times over the weekend. I let every call go to voicemail, not out of cruelty, or not entirely, but because I didn't have anything to say yet that would be fair to either of us. I had spent enough of my life offering fairness I didn't have to spare. This time I waited until I had some. She left a voicemail on the 4th call. Her voice sounded smaller than I'd heard it in a long time. She said the portraits were unlike anything she'd expected. She said she knew things had been difficult. She said she was sorry about that. I listened to it twice, then I closed the drawer. 3 days later, I called her back. "Mom, I heard your message." "I meant it," she said quickly. "I know." I took a breath. "I need you to understand that the mural didn't happen because of what you said to me on the phone. I was already working on it before that, but what you said, that I make things feel heavy, that's not something that rolled off me. I've been hearing variations of that for a long time, and I'm done letting it land and then pretending it didn't." A long silence. "Sera, You don't have to explain it right now. I just needed you to know I heard it, that I've been hearing it." Another pause, then quieter. "You looked happy in that photo, standing next to the wall." It wasn't an apology. Not quite. But it was the first thing she'd said in months that felt like she was actually looking at me, instead of at the shape she needed me to fit into. It was enough for now. Quinn called a week later. "I didn't tell Mom to leave you out," she said, before I'd finished saying hello. "Whatever she told you, that wasn't me. I said things had felt weird since Christmas, that's it. I didn't say don't invite her." I believed her, mostly. "What did you say exactly?" She paused. "I said I didn't know how to fix the weirdness, and I think Mom heard that as..." She didn't finish. "Permission," I said. "Yeah." We were both quiet. "The article ran the last day we were all together," Quinn said finally. "My friend sent it in our group chat. All these people who'd just spent the weekend with our family, who'd heard about you in passing the way you hear about the person who couldn't make it. They all saw it at once. Your face, your work, what you'd built." She paused. "It was a strange moment, Sera." "I imagine it was." "For what it's worth," she stopped, started again. "I think I've always known you were doing something important with your work. I just never figured out how to say that without it sounding like an accusation." "Then just say it like it's the truth," I said, "because that's what it is." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Okay." 3 months later, Rhett and I had a small dinner at our apartment. Good wine. Food I spent an afternoon cooking. Candles that cost less than I'd planned to spend on them. Meg was there. A few neighborhood friends. And Quinn, who showed up holding a bottle of Oregon Pinot, and an expression that reminded me as of someone who had been rehearsing what they were going to say, and then abandoned the rehearsal at the door. We didn't talk directly about Napa. We talked about the mural. Quinn asked about the women I'd painted, their names, where their families were from, what it was like to interview someone about their life, for the purpose of making their face 40 feet tall. She asked good questions. She listened without filling the silences. Near the end of the night, after the wine and after Rhett had put on something soft in the background, Quinn raised her glass. "You've always done things like this," she said, "since we were kids. Made things that mattered to other people. I think I just didn't know how to look directly at it." I let that sit between us for a moment, honest, slightly uneven, real in the way things are real when someone says them for the first time, instead of the version they practiced. "Then just look directly at it next time," I said. "That's all." My parents weren't there. I hadn't asked them. That was still a work in progress. And I had finally stopped treating works in progress, like emergencies that needed to be resolved before I could breathe. On the 6-month anniversary of the unveiling, I went back to the mural by myself. Early morning, the city still gathering itself. Mr. Dow was already inside, moving between the racks with his unhurried early morning pace. He saw me through the glass and raised a hand. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up. The four women looked back at me, the way I'd painted them to. Not past the viewer towards something in the distance, but directly at whoever was standing there, as if to say, "You're looking at me. I'm looking back. That is the entire point of this." I used to believe that being left out by the people who are supposed to love you most was the worst thing. That the measure of whether you mattered was whether you'd been included, whether your name had been on the list, whether the seat at the table was yours by default or by request or not at all. I built a lot of my sense of safety around those measurements. I spent a lot of years taking them. What I know now is that being truly overlooked, the kind that cuts, the kind that stays, the kind you finally stop trying to explain away, sometimes leaves you with nothing to do but turn around and look at what's directly in front of you. And sometimes what's directly in front of you has been there for a long time, waiting quietly for you to stop looking somewhere else. I took a photo of the wall and sent it to Meg. She wrote back one line, "This is who you've always been." I read it standing on the sidewalk. Then I pocketed my phone and walked home through a city that was just waking up, past the coffee shop pulling up its gate, past the man arranging newspapers on the corner of Burnside the way he did every morning, past the dog walkers and the runners and the particular quality of early light on wet pavement that makes a city look like it was just invented. I used to think the worst thing that could happen was to be forgotten, even by people who were supposed to remember you. Now I know the truth. Being made to feel invisible is exactly what teaches you how to be seen.